we're now in this stage where we want to be led by somebody we trust and we want to be supporting them as opposed to working for them. And I think that mentality shift has caused a lot of interesting ripple effects in the career market for sure.
Right? The whole difference between the aggressiveness side and assertiveness, and how do you show up as a leader to encourage others and still have your voice heard and to be seen, but in such a way that it's not coming off as rude, disrespectful, and more of like the seniority differential between you and your team.
Yeah. It's, I think it's an old school mentality, right?
Yeah,
it used to be like, I'm the boss, right?
Yeah.
And I would like to think that we've evolved past that. But
Right?
that mentality, like you have to have a certain pedigree, you have to have a certain degree, you have to have a certain background, and then you're in charge and everybody else is just a peon who listens. Welcome back to this episode of Secrets of the Career Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden, and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know that they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtains and some tips and tricks to ultimately make you successful in your career and help you progress a little bit faster. Hi, lovelies. Welcome back. I'm so excited you're joining for today's episode because we are going to be talking about achieving success as a leader with Natalie Serebrennik, also known as like my coach bestie. We roomed together in Mexico, so we have a deep bond. I'm so excited to have her on the show. She is a certified professional coach. She empowers leaders in high pressure environments, specifically with over 18 years herself in capital markets. She combines extensive industry knowledge with her coaching expertise to support leaders in achieving their professional goals. And basically, she's just fabulous. So welcome, Natalie. It is amazing to have you on the show.
Oh my gosh, I love you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
It's going to be an awesome chat. So why don't you tell listeners a little bit about your professional background and then also your coaching background as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So my professional background, you're right. Extensive capital market experience. I'm what you call what you wouldn't recommend to do. So I got a job at a bank and I stayed at that bank for my whole career. So generally speaking, any advice that I would give anyone coming out of university or college would be try new experiences. Why pigeonhole yourself to one brand? And that is what I did. However, in context, I did have multiple roles within that like full experience. So from sales to trading to equity research, I tried all of the pieces on the capital market side. I had a very fruitful career in capital markets, and my decision to leave really had nothing to do with me not being happy. It was really an extension of me realizing that I needed to really just jump into my passion, which started to elevate itself, I would say, for the last third part of my career in helping others achieve growth and success.
And it's so you, because having known you in this stage, like just your amazing coaching abilities like ooze from your very pores. And so I can imagine how that was translating in your corporate world. And we're lucky to have you on the coaching side now. So why don't you give us a little insight into what successful leadership looks like to you?
Great question. So for me, successful leadership is really two approaches. It's multifaceted. So you have your how well you lead, how well you can actually lead a team of individuals to get the job done. And then on the flip side of things, it's how well you achieve results. So the way that I see it on the initial prong, it's how you inspire, how you motivate others to reach their full potential, right? It's creating that culture of trust and collaboration where people feel free and encouraged to speak up and share their voice and their ideas, but also navigating challenges that arise, which happen all the time because it's life and it's business, and being able to navigate through those challenges effectively as a team, I think is super important when it comes to successful leadership. It's not just me versus them, it's we. How can we do this together? And really taking the the last point I want to share is like really taking that vision from the top and being able to communicate it effectively so that everyone on your team feels like they're part of the vision. And that right there that's magic. When your team feels like they're part of creating that vision, they're so much more invested in the results because they feel like what they do matters.
It's so key what you're pointing out, Natalie, because I think a lot of times when we think of a leader or an executive within a company, we think a lot of like the clout piece, right? Look at their background, look at their credentials. And I would argue the same as what you're saying, which is a successful leader does not mean you hold a certain title or you had a certain education. It's that you're able to inspire and motivate people towards a common goal, right? And you and I were actually discussing this earlier on even like one of your LinkedIn posts. And there's something unique about the leader who can't just get things done themselves, but can get a whole group to get things done with them.
Absolutely. And that right, that's like what I call the secret sauce of really great leadership. Having everyone alongside you want to be able to achieve the same success because they're just as invested as you are.
Yeah. And that's it's funny because I'm coming back from a corporate offsite, right? Where we did a lot of this strategy work. Where are we going? What's the future? And that was like the number one piece of feedback from my team was like, I get it. I see the vision of where we're going. Like I want this for all of us. And pre that, I think I had a very highly motivated team, but they didn't click into what that long-term vision was. And that difference is really important when you're trying to build scale and build progression. So what are some of like the myths that come to mind when we think of like this leadership aspect? I feel like there are plenty we could dive into, but curious what kind of comes to your mind first.
Yeah, such a great question. Okay, so the myths. Well, for starters, and we were just getting to this with with the clout building, right? And having like this expected persona of yourself. So what comes to mind first as a myth is you have to be aggressive to be effective, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole difference between the aggressiveness side and assertiveness, and how do you show up as a leader to encourage others and still have your voice heard and to be seen, but in such a way that it's not coming off as rude, disrespectful, and more of like the seniority differential between you and your team.
Yeah. It's, I think it's an old school mentality, right?
Yeah,
It used to be like, I'm the boss, right?
Yeah.
And I would like to think that we've evolved past that. But
Right?
that mentality, like you have to have a certain pedigree, you have to have a certain degree, you have to have a certain background, and then you're in charge and everybody else is just a peon who listens to you. I think to your point, we're now in this stage where we want to be led by somebody we trust and we want to be supporting them as opposed to working for them. And I think that mentality shift has caused a lot of interesting ripple effects in the career market for sure.
Yeah, like when I think of, and it's interesting because I've worked with different walks of life, and working on a trading floor for as long as I did, I'm very used to that high temperature type of behavior, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and easily it could sway aggressive very quickly. Not much a trade can go the wrong side and you see a different side of the trader pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right. And so I do appreciate the fact that when you're in a high pressured environment, having the appreciation that there could be moments throughout your day that can create this type of reaction. So, but as a leader, own it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be perfect, which kind of gives me like, it leads me to another myth almost, right? This notion that leaders have to have all the answers. They have to be perfect. They can never make any mistakes. It's okay. We're human. We're going to get triggered and we're going to have a reaction. We may have not, would have loved to have in that moment. Own it, reflect back, have a conversation about it. The worst thing you can possibly do is just pretend like it didn't happen or justify it in your head as it's excusable because of the environment that we're in. That's where I have a problem with that approach.
I love this because this is the second thing that I notice that great leaders do is like that willingness to admit when they maybe handled the situation in not the ideal way. And I'll give an example. I had an interaction with an executive in my corporate side. Basically, slides were not done the way they needed to be done. Very high escalation, very high visibility, very rapid fall down, only to find that they were actually totally fine. And we were looking in the wrong place, the wrong deck, and we're okay. And my executive messaged me after and was like, may have overreacted a bit. And I appreciate that because it gives justification to the fact that I was like, did we overreact? Was this a bit of a mistake? Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you're finding the information on this podcast helpful and you're looking to take control of your career and start to elevate yourself to the next level, go ahead and check out our course. Go to bit.ly/career coach course to get signed up today and to start taking your career to the next level and navigate the secrets of the career game. But also, it gives me trust that like when they are hard on me, it is justified. And if they are hard on me in something that's not justified, they'll also take ownership for it. And we need that balance because that's what gives your team that space to make mistakes, which I think we could say technically would be a third myth, which is like your team can never make any mistakes. But the reality is that I'm a believer in like rapid iteration. Like if we're going to make a mistake, let's do it really quickly so we know it's a mistake and we can pivot rather than spend 8 months prepping some huge project that then is a mistake. And I think for you to cultivate that type of space within your team, they have to feel comfortable coming to you with those missteps.
Yeah, it's so funny when you were sharing that. Immediately, my thought just went back to us in the mastermind in Cancun and when the whole concept of messy action came about, and now it's literally my favorite phrase, and it's like my mantra now because there's so much truth behind just let's make the mistakes quicker and we'll learn from them as a team, and to add on to it, let's learn from them collectively. Like, let's do it together. It's not just a siloed, and there's no finger pointing. It's not about, executing blame or pointing blame. It's about owning it, understanding where the opportunity to not make that mistake again and how we can approach a situation differently.
Yeah. And I'm a huge proponent of the messy action. I would rather fail fast, learn fast, and then get on to the next thing than spend a bunch of time stressing out about creating the perfect solution. And we were talking just before this podcast about all the areas of my life where there is clearly not a perfect solution. We're just winging it. And sometimes that's important to kind of make that progress. So we've kind of danced around this already, but I'd love to hear from your perspective when it comes to leadership. What is more important, that soft skill side or that technical hard skill side?
Okay. So yeah, I definitely have a strong opinion. I feel both are important. So I'll start off by saying that. However, to move from a good leader to a great leader, you need those soft skills, no doubt. There's such a distinction. Like the actual hard skills is what I interpret to be as the competency for you to be able to do your job well, right? The strategic thinking, the ability to, take a vision and understand what it is and be able to communicate it in a way so that everyone gets what they need to do. But then the inspiring, like everything we were talking about in the first question, how you truly motivate others, without that piece, you're still like, you're a boss. And I don't want to take it away. You're doing your job well, but are you a great leader? No.
Yeah. I mean, of course I agree. My whole niche is in the soft skills space. And I do think technical skills are really important, right? Yeah. You have to be able to prove you are capable of your job to continue progressing, period. Yeah. But you can definitely be held back because you lack soft skills. And there's a great book called The New Extraordinary Leader by, I want to say John Zigweed. And it's very data dense. I don't recommend it from like a leisurely on the beach kind of read. It's more of a like, do you enjoy data analytics? Then you'll like this book. But he talks about the 21 facets of successful leadership. And to your point, he talks about the good versus the great. And the great leaders differentiate themselves in 21 facets. And one of the 21 is technical skills.
Mm.
And the other 20 are soft skills. And when you think of it from that lens, that like, that's what's distinguishing these great leaders from everybody else. Like the data says you've got to hone in on those soft skills, and the technical skills get you there. But the soft skills are what make you great and what make you successful at those executive roles.
100%. Like I think back to the leaders that I've had in my past, and the ones that I don't remember, the really smart ones, the ones that, okay, I'll take a step back. We're all smart. We're all there for a reason. If you weren't smart enough, you wouldn't be at the table, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone's smart, but I don't remember what specifically about them, like their competencies, how were they able, their technical capabilities, their ability to do on the hard side of things, on the hard skill side. But the soft skills, I remember how they make me feel.
Mm-hmm.
How do I feel supported? Do I feel heard? Do I feel like they have my back in a difficult conversation? Do I feel like, do I trust the fact that they're going to advance and promote me the way they say they will? That's what I remember.
So I'm going to go a slight aside on this topic because I think it's an interesting one that I've been kicking around lately. Is a lot of people, I think, tend to complain that corporate is not a straight meritocracy. Right? They think, well, I worked hard, I should get promoted. Or I did this extra project, I should get promoted. Or I covered for somebody on maternity leave, I should get promoted. And we think this way, which is a very technical skill set oriented view. But I would argue that a true meritocracy where only the hardest workers get promoted becomes a really bad thing at senior leadership. Because who wants to work for somebody who's incredibly technically skilled and cannot communicate?
Yeah.
Like nobody. I don't want to work for that guy because how is he going to give me feedback? Probably going to micromanage me. Probably going to be all up in my grill with all the technical instead of doing what I need them to do, which is advocate for me, to your point. Sell themselves, sell our team, get us promoted. And so a straight meritocracy actually becomes a really toxic work environment really quickly if you don't have good soft skills at the top of the house. So I'm curious to get your perspective because this is something that I hear all the time. Well, like I worked really hard and I didn't get promoted. But like, does that warrant a promotion, especially once you start getting to those middle to upper management levels?
So I love this topic so much. It hits home because I was that person, Kendall, for years. I was like, but why isn't this happening? Doesn't he see how much value I bring to the table? Look at all this amazing work. I never complain. I don't ask for things when it's out of turn. I'm like, you're on paper, perfect employee. When is my turn going to come? Mm-hmm. And then after years of building up this like frustration because I was so disappointed year after year after the performance reviews and I wasn't hearing what I wanted to hear, then I got angry. There's only and it's because of my anger and frustration that I had that aha moment, that light bulb went off. I'm like, all right, in order for me to truly succeed in my career path and elevate my seniority level so I can get paid more, so I can work on more interesting initiatives, so I can do the things that I want to do, I gotta take control of my career. I gotta have these conversations. I gotta ask for what I want. So I'm very much of the proponent that your hard work keeps you in your seat, maybe keeps you employed and paid, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get elevated because of that.
Yeah.
You gotta prove, you gotta communicate, you gotta build your network, you gotta demonstrate.
Yeah.
And that is, yeah. I'll pause there for your comment here, but I feel strongly about that one.
Well, and I think we've all been that person, right? Who worked really hard.
Yeah.
And when you learn how little working really hard has to do with your career progression, and I'm not saying, again, that you don't have to deliver on your core responsibilities. You absolutely do. But the things that have differentiated me in my career that have gotten me progressed, that get my clients progressed, are very, very rarely, I delivered this really huge project.
Yeah.
They're almost always, I identified new problems. I created a strategy. I communicated that strategy. I advocated for myself. I advocated for my team. Those are the types of things They get you recognized. And again, coming off this offsite last week, we do performance reviews. And so, of course, my team gets feedback. And the feedback of my team was they are best in class support. If you need anything, Kendall's team has the answer. And that's what I want to be. That's the brand that we're building. That's where we want to sit. But they didn't come up with that themselves. I have been communicating that every single meeting for 3 years to create that brand persona, and then we follow through on it, right? Yeah. But you've got to have that outspoken. So I think it's interesting as you get into the higher levels of leadership, how you add value changes. So I'd love to hear, what are some like unique strategies that you've seen people implement that have allowed them to achieve their goals or really drive success?
Yeah, it's a good one. The ones that really stake out for me as the best strategies, the ones that I'm like, okay, I'm stealing this one for myself because it's this good. It's that out of the box thinking. It's not just doing the things because other people have done them and have seen success. It's not being afraid to do things differently, right? Challenge the status quo. It's as much as it's important for you to have that vision and that belief, it's creating that level of like that psychological safety within your team so that they can also experiment with you, be creative. And I've seen beautiful outcomes from this type of initiative. It's not in certain industries, it's more encouraged than others, right? In a startup space, in tech startup space, for example, right? It's very much, yes, that's the approach of doing things. We support that. Maybe on the banking side of things, not so much. This is how we do it.
Monolithic banking, they do not want it.
Right? So, but that's not to say that you can't build in that level of creativity within your own team. And that's the beauty of it. Yeah, working on the floor, there's so many different teams and there's so many different opportunities for collaboration. And that was my sweet spot. I was able to, when a high level initiative was brought to me, we need to solve for this issue. I'm like, okay, who can I speak to? How can I collaborate? Who outside of my area? And let's just have conversations. Let's grab a coffee, informal, and talk about this. I want to hear your ideas. Be surprised with how many great ideas are out there, but people don't think to bring them to the table. Right? So it's that out of the box, really, and thinking and encouragement of others to do the same.
I totally second what you're saying, Natalie, especially because I think, the world that we live in right now with this Gen AI trend and like machine learning and, everybody's talking about how do we bring in AI. I mean, I'm like almost sick of talking about it and I'm a huge proponent of it. Yeah. But when you're thinking of this space, I feel a lot of time what I see is leaders think, well, my job is to do A, and they focus on the box of A, and they don't think about, well, if I could automate A, then I could offer B, which I'm not capable of offering today because A takes too much time. We don't have capacity and it's too intensive and it takes too much focus. So we can't think about B. And to your point, the great leaders figure out, okay, how do we innovate A? How do we automate A? How do we change A so that we can offer B? But the mistake I see leaders make is they focus so much on all the great work they can do in A that they never plan B. And then they're like, well, I'm done. And their leader's like, great, thank you so much for this. You're now fired, right? Yeah. So you have to have that balance of how do you automate, innovate, change, come up with unique opportunities within your org, but then how do you think of what that next evolution is too, that allows you to grow, but also your team?
Yeah. And to your point, I can see a situation where maybe that is not communicated. Maybe you are that good and you propose or, suggest, this is my plan. Every leader has a leader except for the top of the house, but technically, generally speaking, there's layers of that management hierarchy. So if you're sharing a vision with one of your leaders, that what you want to do, and I plan on automating this, and then my goal is to get to this point, and then I think it would be really cool if we could try this. and they don't support that vision, then what? Do you stop yourself short just because your immediate boss isn't support? Like, the idea was great. What you had behind there, the level of thinking was great. Exactly what you said. It's what you should be doing. So what happens when you don't have your manager buy-in to go ahead and execute on this vision? How do you stand out?
Yeah. And see, I'm as an individual leader, as opposed to the coaching side of my life, as an individual leader, I'm the do it first, ask for forgiveness after kind of leader. Like, I would just execute plan A and then be like, hey, here's all the great stuff we have. Now we're working on plan B, right? This is the evolution of the team. Hope you guys are happy with it. But I think a lot of the time, to what you're describing, leaders will follow the appropriate chain of command. They go to their boss, are like, hey, here's this great vision. And their boss is like, yeah, no, don't do that. I need you focused on BAU. Do your BAU. And I think in those situations, one, you should have a more robust network than just your manager, right? The buck cannot stop at your manager for your own progression or for things like gathering buy-in. So what's your relationship like with your skip level? Do you have partner groups who may buy in? Are there back channels you can take? And that's not to say that we're circumventing your leadership, but it's that we're gathering support and buy-in for an idea we know is great. And then are there places like me to do it first and ask for forgiveness on the back end? Like, hey, I know you said you weren't really passionate about this, but I'd love to demo it to you now that it's done. And see what your thoughts are and see if there's other areas we can leverage this. Because a lot of the time, your manager may be just as afraid of innovation as you want to be. And that holds you guys back. And how do you navigate that? But I'd be curious what other tactics you have for garnering that managerial support and creating that progress within your org.
I mean, everything you just shared was so on point. I think the biggest point that I would want to, hit home is just don't stop. Don't let that be the reason why you don't progress that idea further. That's to not have someone's support. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that shouldn't stop you from actually executing on it. Just what's another way to be able to go and do it? So use your creativity. Allow yourself to, and as a leader, you don't have to do this on your own. You don't, like, going back to one of the myths, you don't have to have all the answers. Engage your team, engage stakeholders. How do we go about this? And also I would even back it up a bit and understand what the concerns are specifically from your immediate manager. That is it more just like of a time constraint, or is it potential roadblocks that he or she perceives that you're not being able to overcome? I'd want to understand what the hesitation there is to limit that support, and then get the evidence to support against that, and then go and do it.
I love it. So I also think that, the industries are changing, right? Executive leadership is different now than it was 10 years ago from where I sit. So what are some of the biggest challenges you see upcoming for executive leaders, and like, how can they prepare themselves for what appears to be like an increasingly competitive market?
Yeah, that's a great one. So one of the biggest ones that come to mind for me is, and I used to see it all the time, I'd love to get your opinions on this too, retaining and attracting good talent.
Yeah.
The younger generation, they're more inclined to skip, like job skip. So like I'm more of that old school mentality where I stayed and I just transitioned from role to role within the same company. Generally speaking, and you see it with your clients, they're much quicker to transition if they're not getting what they want. Yep. So they're not afraid to put themselves out there and make the jump. If anything, they're probably worried, is it too soon to jump because I've only been there for a year, right? So if they're not fulfilled, they will look. But if they're that good, how can you fulfill them? And it's expensive. It's expensive to
hire
have your good people go. So that's the idea of understanding, why are they going, right? The whole idea of flexibility. So I'll just share with you really quick. One of my clients just landed a new job. She was searching for a new job. And what stuck out to her the most on the job offer was, we expect you to work 8 hours a day. I don't care if you're working in your pajamas at nighttime, or before the day even starts. You're a big girl, you're a big boy. You're going to figure out the time that you're going to work best and you're going to get the job done.
Yeah.
But then you'll also have to be available for, any team meetings to move the mission. And she was obsessed with that because that's not what she had coming back. She had this expectation. And again, certain industries will allow for it more than others. But being able to have more flexibility as to when the work can get done is huge for a lot of people.
Yeah, I love that. I would expound on this just one level further in speaking with retention and attracting is something I was talking about with an executive recruiter friend of mine not too long ago, is your ability to recruit people who've worked for you before is also a selling point when you're being recruited, right? When you can say confidently, hey, I've been able to retain 30% of my workforce over my last 4 jobs who are all incredibly high achieving individuals, and I bring access to that group of people with me. To your point, attracting and retaining, that's a huge val prop for people who are trying to recruit, right? If you are at that executive leadership level, does part of what you offer become your network and your relationships? And, I've referenced this on other episodes, but I've recruited for 6 positions so far in my current role, and 5 of the 6 have been filled with people who worked for me before or worked with me before or knew me before at a previous company. And so almost my entire workforce is people that I knew who I brought into the company. And that's something that my company always talks about is like, you just like know everybody. I'm like, I don't know everybody, but I knew 5 people who I knew would be really, really great. And I bring them with me. And that alone is enough to change the trajectory of a team. And so how do you make that part of your branding is like, hey, it's not just me you get access to a pipeline of great people who are going to help you continue to elevate your program.
I love that. I think that that's such a solid, I hate to call it a sales pitch, but when you're going after that job and you're selling your value prop, that's huge, especially the more senior you are and the more competitive it is because there's less seats at the top of the house, vying for that opportunity to be able to bring that type of value behind your name and your experience. That's huge.
So as we're wrapping up today's episode, which I think has been so great and really focused on that leader aspect, which we don't always spend a ton of time on, what are some parting words that you would give for anybody who's listening, who's like, that's me, I'm in that leadership bucket, I want to continue growing and be successful? Like, what's one thing that you would tell them to go do to start finding that success?
Yeah, for starters, the fact that you want to become a better leader, that to me is music to my ears. I really do believe to my core that leaders are not born. Anyone can be a leader if they want to be, but it needs to start off with that true want for yourself to be a better leader. So for anyone listening and anyone in the network, if you find yourself in a position where you're either aspiring to be a leader or you already are a leader and looking to elevate yourself, the biggest piece of advice is never underestimate the power of feedback. I think that has been an area that is underutilized a lot in our growth journeys. Being able to sit across the table from people that you've worked with in all levels of seniority to understand how you can show up better and what gaps you need to fill, as opposed to assuming and creating these stories of what you can and can't, or maybe inflated ego-based assumptions. Eliminate all the noise and just go to the sources of points of contact that you've worked with to know, where can I grow from here? And without the judgment piece, it's an opportunity. Everything you hear back is an opportunity for you to learn and grow from. It's not something that, reflecting back to my past, I started tapping in more into the feedback loop and appreciating the feedback and executing on that feedback, understanding how that pertains to me. When that shift happened for me, when I started to take control over my career, it was all part of it. And listen, granted, disclaimer, not every piece of feedback is going to be 100% spot on. However, allowing yourself the opportunity to even hear what it is and understand and reflect on what possible gaps that you have. I mean, those are amazing opportunities for continued advancement, if you ask me.
I love that. So today's episode, I feel like, was so amazing. I'm hoping everybody listening got as much out of it as I did. But Natalie, if people are listening and they're like, I need help with this, I want to learn more about becoming a great leader and a great executive, where can they find you?
So I live on LinkedIn. That's my favorite social media platform. So definitely pop into LinkedIn, send me a DM, let's connect, let's have a chat. I also have a website, but LinkedIn it's more interactive.
Awesome.
Let's meet on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we will link that in the show notes. So if you guys listened to today's episode and you absolutely loved it, which I know you did, please give us 5 stars in your review. And also make sure you're leaving any comments or questions down below for me or Natalie to answer. But otherwise, it's been so amazing having you on the show. We'll definitely have to have you back.
Absolutely. I had so much fun. Thank you so much, everyone. I loved it.